Alamak. Wait kejap. Alright, we'll start now. Okay, so Assalamualaikum and a very good day to all present today. Welcome to the quarter-final round of English Debate Competition, InterVarsity Science E-Debate Challenge 2021. The motion for this debate is, this House, in light of the recent pandemic, would make vaccinations mandatory to all citizens. I will be the chairperson and the timekeeper for room 4. Let me now introduce the debaters to you. Acting as the government team for this debate is the team from Let Siam Ta, with Ms. Yap as the Prime Minister, Ms. Ili as the Deputy Prime Minister, and Mr. Diva as the Government Whip. And acting as the opposition team for this debate is the team from Sunway, with Ms. Gitanjali as the opposition leader, Ms. Shirin as the second opposition speaker, and Ms. Wen Jun as the opposition whip. Our panel of adjudicators consists of Aisyah Nadira Ahmad Nazmi, Mr. Lai Yujin, and Mr. Tuan Ashraf Jauhari bin Tan Ali. Now we come to our debate today. To open the case from the government team, I call upon the Prime Minister to start the debate session.
Okay, I would prefer my POI in. I would prefer my POI by unmute yourself, and then I'm sorry that I couldn't turn on my cam because I have weak connections. So yeah, let me have a second to set up everything.
All right, it's okay.
Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, today's motion is this House, in light of the recent pandemic, would make vaccinations mandatory to all citizens. And we, as the government side, we are going to support. We should make vaccination mandatory. Vaccination is basically an injection of a killer microbe in order to stimulate this immune system against this disease, so that can be prevent to the disease. And vaccinations has been found in great success throughout the past history. For example, like widespreading, especially to the widespreading disease like polio. And then vaccinations, especially for this COVID-19 pandemic, are the best options to protecting us against the disease. There is no other alternative. Any effort to undermine it is a harm to you, to your family, to your friends, and to your whole society and communities. And why people nowadays going to reject the vaccinations? First, it might due to the conspiracy theory. They believe this is an act of governments to like control the citizens. And second, this might due to their culture and religious issues, like they believe it is something the substances in the vaccination is going to against the principal rules in their religious. And thirdly, doubtness of science. Their queries whether this vaccination is really efficient. So is why are they reject? And now the status quo in all around the world is that the there's most of the country where vaccinations are met optional to them. Max it is the status quo is neutral, where people can take and not choose not to take the not to take the vaccinations. And then most of the country has the capability to provide these vaccinations, and it's undeniable that the widespread of COVID-19 is still severness for now. So we governments are going to propose the mechanism for it. Firstly, we are going to have it regulated by law to make the vaccination become mandatory. We are going to legislate a specific legislation there. For example, like in Malaysia, we are going to legislate it under the Prevention and Control of Infection Disease Act. And in other countries, we may be under some other health act of their countries. And this, we will insert that the mandatory vaccination is made for the purpose of law, which is to for the public health, because public health in most of the country laws, public health is over have to overshadow mass to overshadow individual consents. And then we are no for the vaccinations, we are not based on the registrations. When we are going to put like we call them and that have a must to come unless they provide a valid reason for it. And we only provide exceptions to those who really cannot take. For example, they are allergic to these vaccinations. And why when we make the things mandatory under the law, the hospital, we are based on the IC. For example, in Malaysia we have IC. So the hospital will have record who haven't taken, and who are we going to call, and who are we going to after treating, after taking all doses, they are going to be protected. We will record their names, and then the penalties will be in the forms of monetary or restriction to their access to some restriction to their access, and even a great sum of monetary or imprisonments. And second thing is we are going to create the awareness, like once before we are going to have the vaccinations for them, we are going to give education at the rural areas, and we are sending team to the rural areas to coach them to like why we are going to take these vaccinations. So the government side burden of proof is before that, the correct awareness, we are going to go very detailed, done by the government's public health sectors and doctors. Yeah. And burden of proof is that government is why making vaccination is mandatory, because it's for the best preparation for the all pandemic occurs in the future, and why it's justified to trample over so-called individual rights as it involve the public health at large. And opposition, the burden of proof of opposition is to tell us how following to these individual rights will actually do any good to public health in the face of any crisis. So my first argument is when the thing is concerning the concept of right, we are going to tell you this so that important to overshadow the social responsibility and the global individual's harm as a whole. So my first argument is that the social responsibility, there's a social responsibility to reduce the risk of the global individuals. And we know there's some more people in the world that have the immune deficiency, like they are the old person, they are the child. So if there's just you imagine that if there is one person becomes smelly, for example, like one person being smelly in the house, there's a kid's responsibility to make that he is not smelly. So if he choose to contribute to the society and they expect the society to contribute his back, so they are going to use you have a burden to make himself not smelly. So why we need vaccinations? For example, for instance, herd immunity. Herd immunity occurs when a large portion of community becomes immune to the disease and making the spread of disease from the person to person unlikely. As a result, the whole community will become as a result, the community will become protected and not just those who are immune. So we are protect this to protect the individual rights, but we can't say we are going to protect the individual rights but neglect the others as social responsibility, because we know that community are more than important than individuals. Because if you are not taking vaccine, your family members, your child, your bad of disease who are going to blame. Okay, so for example, why this so important? Like in Kelantan, said they turn out to no vaccine, they are so bad. The people are actually due to their fear, because law doesn't do anything. With law, we can detect it and we can make it mandatory and provide more allocations the budget to to educate public why vaccination is necessary. Because so far our awareness campaign is not taken seriously. So this is why we are promote vaccination is important to make mandatory. We are proudly to propose.
All right. Thank you for that
Yeah.
speech. All right, thank you. The timing was 7 minutes and 30 seconds. All right, so to open the case from the opposition team, I call upon the leader of opposition to continue the debate session.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
All right, okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, I feel like government fails to recognize that this debate is not just about practical outcomes of vaccinating, but it is actually an ethical debate. Basically, the debate is about people who would is basically about vaccinating people in your country and whether we're going to force them to take these vaccines through a mandated nationalized plan or a more opt-in version of a vaccination plan. So we have two different stakeholders in this debate. We have the regular we have the anti-vax community, which is people who are opposed to getting the vaccine because of their fears of what's in the vaccine, or regardless of why, they just are hesitant or reluctant to take the vaccine. And then we also have people who are going to get the vaccine anyway because they're willing to get vaccinated, and they're not really what we're debating about. But they're not really who we're debating about. We're talking about whether we're going to force anti-vaxxers to take a vaccine that they do not want to take. On opposition side of the government, on opposition side of the debate, we believe that a more opt-in or a voluntary form of the nationalized vaccination plan would be more sustainable and would be a better option for the country, because if we use a opt-in vaccination plan through if we use an opt-in vaccination plan, we will be able to get more people to take the vaccine in the long run. We believe that consent and autonomy is extremely important when we're talking about medicine and when we're talking about freedom of choice. And when you're yeah, I'll take that.
Okay, thank you. For example, the hepatitis B, for example, I'm just giving an example. Hepatitis B vaccination that you receive in school, you're supposed to get consent from the parents. And because of that factor, a lot of parents actually restrict their kids from getting the vaccination. So can you please justify why that is better than the child having protection? Thank you.
If we take a child from an anti-vax family and vaccinate them against the family's wishes, firstly, there will be an immense amount of tension within that family, and that child will have to go through a lot living at home with people who are against the decision that has been made for her or him. And secondly, this child will probably never be taken to the public the will never be treated with the healthcare system again, as in they will never go to the hospital again, because their family will be immensely reluctant to take them to a hospital, and because they have a lot of spite and they're very distrustful of the system because of the fact that their child was forced to get a vaccine that they were very much against in the first place. Moving on. As I was saying, we're talking about the right to autonomy in this debate. We're talking about when you're getting a vaccine, when you are choosing to vaccinate yourself, you're making the decision to basically allow a chemical to be injected inside of you, and you should have that right to your bodily autonomy. You should be able to decide whether you are putting something in your body, because at the end of the day, it is your body, and it's your right to decide whether or not you want that inside your body or not. Forcing people to take the vaccine against their will, forcing them to follow this mandated plan, it's just not justified from government side. The harms of revoking this policy is that it could backfire, in the sense that the anti-vax community does not value public health above their own opinions. They care about their opinion more than the public health. And if they are forced to take the vaccine, it would make them feel like they aren't respected by the system, and they would probably be reluctant to use the healthcare system again, and they will stay away from using the healthcare system because of the way that they have been treated by it. And this is in direct rebuttal to what the Prime Minister has said earlier. And this is harmful because when a whole community loses trust in our healthcare system, when essentially a whole community shuts themselves off from a very important part of society, of something they actually require, you're effectively just diminishing the public health, and you're putting these people in more harm in the long run, compared to if you force them to take a vaccine. So on our side of the debate, we believe that an opt-in nationalized vaccination plan would be much better, and that through education and campaigning, we can help to gain as much people who are willing to take the vaccine on their own, by making their own choices to be vaccinated. And with that, never been prouder to oppose. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I would like to thank the speaker for their speech. The timing was 7 minutes and 5 seconds. Okay, so to continue our debate today, I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for their side.
Hi. Okay. Give me a second. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I prefer my POIs for you to voice out, and I'm sorry, I can't open my camera. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening. Abid Good morning, I bid to the adjudicators and fellow debaters. So the motion for today's debate is this House, in light of the recent pandemic, would make vaccinations mandatory to all citizens. And we, the government side, support this motion. And as the second speaker of the government side, I will address all the weaknesses in the arguments brought up by the leader of opposition and present the government's case on the issue. So first of all, let's see what the leader of opposition had brought up. So in her statement, she stated that there's a clash of whether this is an ethical debate or a practical debate. First of all, she did not justify why it's more ethical to let people decide whether to have vaccination on their own, whether to decide whether they should or should not get vaccinated, or whether vaccinated shouldn't be mandatory. And we, as the government side, we believe that it's practical for all citizens to gain to be mandatory towards vaccination. So the opposition also stated that they would prefer an opt-in vaccination plan, and because of the anti-vaccine groups. Let me give you an example. If we let the people do whatever they want to do, eventually the wrong ideology would go over. Now, you might think, who are you to judge about the wrong ideology? But let me tell you something. Vaccination is one of the most beneficial plans, and I will reinstate this in my points. So she also stated, after my POI, she stated that people from anti-vax families, they would have controversies, they would have backlash when they are vaccinated without their consent, without their parents' consent, when they are vaccinated, and they would rise tension, and they would stop from going to government hospitals. The anti-vaccine groups don't really oppose to hospitals. They just oppose to vaccine groups. So that fact is already wrong. And that is an assumption. Can you wait just a minute? And they also stated that they should have the ability to choose what goes into them. Yes, everybody has the right to choose what goes into you. You get to choose what kind of food, you get to choose what kind of vaccine, I guess, according to the opposition team. But you must understand that public interest, it overshadows private interest. And this, I can come up with the analogy, for example, of gun laws. Okay, public interest is overshadowing private interest, because there are some individuals who want guns, but over the public interest, the government cannot allow it, because it would prove more detrimental. And that is why it must be made mandatory for people to get vaccinated, so that the whole community, and not only themselves, the whole community is safer from detriment. Okay, before I continue to my points, I would take the POI.
Yeah, recognize. So at a point in time in which you infringe upon anti-vaxxers' autonomy, that is the point in time in which they don't go to hospitals because they're afraid of their autonomy being infringed on.
Of course. So now you're trying to reinstate the fact that anti-vaccinations, vaccine groups, they are afraid to go to hospitals because they're afraid of what the hospitals might put into their body. But let me ask you, if they broke a leg, if they crack their head, would they not go to the hospital? They would still go to the hospital. That's why I'm saying they're not completely against hospitals. So you're just based on the wrong fact on vaccination. So now, moving on to my point. My first point is that vaccination can mean a difference between life and death. And that is why we want to try to make vaccination a mandatory statement. Because as we know, vaccines stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity against one or there are several diseases. And they protect a person from being dangerously infected by a specific disease. So there is, of course, the opposition might come up with the fact that, there is no vaccine that is 100% effective. Of course, but the percentage is 98 to 99% of the effectiveness. And as we know, okay, for example, we also know that seat belts also are not 100% effective. If you are caught in a car accident, a seatbelt doesn't 100% guarantee your safety. However, there is a difference in which if it was a minor accident, you could still be safe. if you wore a seatbelt. If it was a more heavier or bigger accident, you might be more detriment even though you are wearing a seatbelt. And that's what the anti-vax or whatever are trying to push. They're trying to say that it's not 100% effective and that's why they don't want it. But we state that there is no one bright cure that is 100% effective, but at least it reduces the risk of you getting more harm. And that brings me to my second point, that it prevents you from getting a higher medical bill. So this is one point that I feel would be most likely to appeal to the anti-vaccine group, because, for example, okay, this is why we want to make it mandatory, because we want to prevent the public from having to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on medical bills. We want to reduce their medical bills by reducing their harm or their exposure towards diseases. For example, if you are exposed to the COVID disease, if you have vaccination, at least you can be cured with a few antibiotics, with a few medications. But if you are not, if you're extremely exposed without any sort of security, any sort of protection, then you would be more detriment with you having to be the tube has to be stuck down your throat and all that. You have to go through extensive medical procedures just to make sure that you are stable, and that is just stable. While if vaccination reduces the chances of you getting that to that extent of danger by a mile run. So that is why we want to make vaccination mandatory. And it's not just imposing the law, as my first speaker said. We also want the health education system to to give education, to campaign for to spread awareness about the vaccination. And that is what we're trying to push here. We want the law to make it mandatory and the government, the health community to spread awareness. It's not that we're trying to make them quit cold turkey. We want them to be aware of everything and we want them to be safe. Okay, with that, I hope the members of this hall will also agree in supporting today's motion. With that, I rest my case.
All right, I would like to thank the speaker for their remarks. The timing was 7 minutes and 13 seconds. All right, so now I call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue the case for their side.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, yep.
All right, thank you very much. I prefer my POIs verbally. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think the fatal flaw of the entire government case is a complete disengagement with the framing that we've given you at the beginning of this debate. We've told you from the start, this debate isn't about the efficacy of vaccines or about whether or not people should get vaccines. The debate is about the most vulnerable groups of society, aka anti-vaxxers or people who are hesitant about the vaccine, being pushed away even further from the healthcare system at a point in time in which you impose a policy that fundamentally goes against what they believe in. I'm going to talk to you about two things in my speech. I'm going to talk to you about how the policy given by the government is going to increase public distrust in the healthcare system and how it's going to prevent anti-vaxxers from actually even changing their minds, effectively going against the very same premises of public health they want to they claim they want to maintain. But I'm going to respond to some of the claims that are coming out of the government bench, and I'm going to answer what is symmetrical on both sides of the house. Number one, vaccines are great and they are effective. No one is debating on the efficacy of vaccines. The debate isn't about vaccination in and of itself, rather the legislation of a policy that forces vaccinations upon every sector of society. Secondly, our opt-in model is free as well, which means the benefit of lowered medical costs is equal on both sides of the house. We don't think that's something exclusive to government bench. And thirdly, the campaign of education and just increasing awareness on vaccines can be equally done on both sides of the house. We don't think that's a benefit either, like side can claim is exclusive. But I'm going to take government bench at their absolute highest ground and argue what's going to happen after the implementation of their policy. They go on and on about how this policy is so great because you have to vaccinate everyone for the sake of public health. But I'm arguing to you that after the imposition of that policy, you threaten public health further by threatening the public trust people have in these healthcare institutions. First question, all of my rebuttals are going to be integrated within my arguments. First question, how does it create public distrust? We've already told you how anti-vaxxers have opinions about these vaccines and how they distrust these vaccines. We tell you these opinions are deeply set in these person's psyche and in these person's minds in the same way any other person has an opinion about medical decisions. This means that a government imposition telling them or forcing them to get a vaccine actively delegitimizes their opinion and makes them feel like they're the other or that their medical opinion is wrong. It actively sends a message that these people's medical opinions are not validated in the eyes of the law. And that's bad, because forcing them to get the vaccine, therefore, doesn't suddenly mean they're going to change their minds about it, or doesn't suddenly mean they're going to see how beneficial the vaccine is. If anything, it's only going to confirm their fears and suspicions about the vaccine as being no, thank you. It's only going to confirm their fears about the vaccine as being some kind of tool of the government. And it's just going to confirm the fact that the reason why the vaccine should be distrusted is because it's being forced upon them instead of being like given to them in open setting. There's a higher likelihood then, and this is the second layer of my analysis, that they're no longer going to seek medical attention for diseases they would otherwise treat. Why is this true? And this was something that was largely rejected or ignored on the government bench. The reason why anti-vaxxers aren't going to go to hospitals, even for diseases or treatments that do not have to do with vaccines, is because of that perception that the healthcare system no longer cares about their opinions as patients. At a point in time in which you as a government legislate some kind of law that actively infringes upon the right of autonomy to a patient, that is a point in time in which you threaten that person's trust in the healthcare system altogether. It does not matter that legislation only pertains to vaccines. What matters is that legislation actively encroaches upon a person's decision, a person's choice in making medical decisions for themselves. This means that anti-vaxxers no longer go to hospitals for three reasons. Either A, they're afraid of being forced to get vaccinated against their will. For example, if they go to the hospitals for like, I don't know, hepatitis or something, they're afraid of having to be forced into a vaccine. But secondly, even if their medical decisions or the medical treatment they want to seek out has nothing to do with the vaccines, they're not going to go simply because they're afraid of doctors or clinicians overriding their decision, because there's already a precedent in society that the government isn't afraid to just overturn medical decisions of the public. And at the very least, even if those things are not true, the very skepticism in the healthcare system that now exists because you impose a policy that forces people to get vaccines regardless of what they believe is something that's going to like drive them further away, because they now feel like they're not being cared for by their healthcare system. They don't feel like the healthcare system cares about their opinions as patients, and that is the point in time in which you create some sort of disconnect between these people and the healthcare system. This only fuels echo chambers within these communities, because now you unite them against a common enemy. At a point in time in which you tell anti-vaxxers that their decision is immoral or that their decision is like wrong in the eyes of the mainstream, that is a point in which you get them to rally against the healthcare system, because now they're all antagonizing the healthcare system for the same reason. Reason being, they are now actively othered and pushed aside by the very same system you claim to protect. Government bench cannot claim to want to fight for the interests of public health if they actively ignore the fact that these people do not get the public health they deserve in the long run. Why is this true? It's because you eventually cut off this segment of society from healthcare in general, including the children that they want to claim they want to fight for. This is because at a point in time in which these people do not have any trust in the healthcare system anymore, they're not actively going to seek out medical consultation, which means in the long run, you threaten public health even more, simply because you now actively push away a group of people in society further away from the healthcare system. This is bad because you now coerce these people into alternative forms of remedies. Either this looks like pseudosciences or alternative forms of medicine that may not prove to be as effective, simply because they have doubt and skepticism with the integrity of the healthcare system by virtue of them feeling like the healthcare system only exists to impose its own ideals onto patients. This is counterintuitive to public health in general and goes directly against the premise on government bench. What is the comparative on our side? You maintain the people trust in the healthcare system by virtue of maintaining their autonomy, regardless if vaccinations are imperative in curing pandemics. We argue to you that herd immunity can still be achieved even if this sector of society doesn't get vaccinated, simply because we argue that anti-vaxxers make up a minority of society, and therefore herd immunity we don't think is impacted to that great extent. But even if no, thank you. Even if anti-vaxxers don't make up a minority and they make up some like good chunk of society, we still tell you we win out on that clash, because at the very least you preserve these people's interest in the healthcare system and you guarantee that they're going to continue to seek out healthcare in the long run. Vaccinations do not guarantee public health or public safety. What guarantees those two things is a continued relationship of trust between the people and the healthcare system. Government bench's policy actively threatens that by pushing these people away. Second argument, how do we actually get anti-vaxxers to change their minds under our side of the house? Recognize that legislation is the worst way to create discourse, because at the point in time in which you legislate something to be true, that is going to be seen as precedent that the society has to obey. This means that anti-vaxxers are actively going to feel as though their decision to not get vaccinations is something that is morally egregious and opposed by society. This means they're less likely to even want to engage in discourse, because they feel like they're going to be shunned or ashamed because of the fact that they don't agree with the mainstream ideals. How do we achieve that turnover, and how do we achieve anti-vaxxers changing minds on our side of the house? Recognize that I've already told you why it's more likely for anti-vaxxers to go to hospitals under our model. This is true then that when they go to hospitals and they eventually have a point of contact with the doctor's consultations, that is the moment in which they are far more likely to be able to change their minds about vaccines. Because the best way you're going to have to change your mind about something is through interpersonal conversation. At the point in time in which these patients directly engage with doctors in terms of consultancy, and doctors can tell them the benefit of the vaccines, that is the point in time in which they're far more likely to be open about the vaccine, as opposed to whatever model the government wants to impose about just forcefully getting them to have to get them vaccinated. If you want a world that understands how anti-vaxxers are also included in the conversation about public health, and we have to preserve these people's integrity in the healthcare system for the sake of long-term public health instead of just a short-term solution, go with opposition.
All right. Thank you for the remarks. The timing was 7 minutes and 21 seconds. So, ladies and gentlemen, and the honorable adjudicators, I shall now call upon the government whip to rebut.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep.
Right, give me a few seconds, yeah? I'm sorry that I can't turn my camera on because, it's kind of unstable here, my Wi-Fi.
It's okay.
All right, thank you. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. In today's debate, side opposition has clearly made a few flawed assumptions in assuming, number one, anti-vaxxers are people who are neutral in terms of their medical opinion, whereby they had assumed that these anti-vaxxers or these minorities are people who possess a large amount of trust still in the current status quo, and by pushing this particular effort that we are trying to push on our side, which is to make vaccinations mandatory, we will further create distrust in this in the context of these people. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we move on, a very good day I bid to everyone. In today's debate, side government is pushing for a world where we believe that the safety of the public at large is far more important in comparison to upholding the rights of a small number of people who don't believe in vaccinations. Whereas what side opposition is advocating for is an unsafe world whereby on the concept of consent and ethics, opposition is willing to jeopardize the safety of the public at large. And they believe that by doing so, they are able to protect the trust that the people have on the healthcare system, by assuming that these anti-vaxxers do possess a number of trust on the healthcare system. And this is simply unacceptable in this current era, especially in light of the recent pandemic, which is COVID-19, as a lot of people actually do fall prey to the spread of COVID-19. And I would like to provide a further layer of analysis in today's debate, which is in the context of developing countries and backward countries, right, ladies and gentlemen. So there are a few things that I'll be doing in my speech today, which is providing you an analysis of the benefits that we provide, and prove to you why the benefits that we have are exclusive to our side, and our benefits far outweighs whatever benefits that they came up with, and also provide you an analysis on the harm that will occur if our world is accepted, and how we actually mitigate those harms. And the harm that is exclusive to their side is far worse than whatever harm that comes out from our side. Now, firstly, in terms of the benefits, right, there are basically two stakeholders in today's debate, which is the individual, basically those who refuse, or those who refuse to take the vaccinations, and also the society at large. So what will happen for the individuals is that we are able to provide them the protection that they actually needed, which they might not know. And by protecting them, whether they like it or not, we are able to create, number two, a protection in the society, a protection for the society itself, which is a security for the society, in which we are able to protect vulnerable people in the society. For example, the elderly, and also those who are chronically ill, or those who have low immunity in terms of possessing deficiency in terms of their immunity, and this will eventually create herd immunity much efficiently compared to the world that they are advocating for. Whereas on the issue of ethics, on our side, we are also, this is not exclusive only to their side, but on the issue of ethics, we must look at the social responsibility at the end of the day, because we are talking about the safety and also the lives of the people at large. So when you were to compare whether we have to protect the rights of the individuals, or we need to protect the safety or the security of the society, it's obvious that we need to prioritize the safety of the society first. No, thank you. Which is far more significant than protecting the rights, because what will happen is that when we are discussing about in a large number of room in a huge room where we have 100 people and we have a small number of people, let's say around 10 people who doesn't believe in vaccinations, when we choose to not vaccinate them, they will be causing further spread to the other 90 people in that particular room. So what we are doing here is that when we totally redact this luxury of choice in their world, what will happen is that when we make this choice for them, we will be able to provide far more security compared to whatever that they have came out earlier. Now, on their side, the only benefit that they can came out with, that they are able to come up with, is the protection of the rights of these minorities, right? But then, at the end of the day, as I've mentioned before, it is up for us to weigh or to see the balance whether these rights are actually far more significant compared to the security of the public at large. And other than that, they have claimed, I mean, these are some of the claims that they have mentioned before, where it isn't actually a benefit for their side, where they think that they have protected the trust of the people in the healthcare system and they are still able to achieve herd immunity, as these groups are still minority. Yeah. Now, in the essence of how actually they don't protect the trust of the people is that these people already have so less trust in the healthcare system. These anti-vaxxers, they are not only people who don't believe in vaccines, but they don't believe in contemporary medical science at large. When they don't believe in contemporary medical science at large, what will happen is that no matter how bad or how deep or how desperate you convince them to accept contemporary medical science, they won't be able to accept it because they have other ideologies or either beliefs that they believe that they should protect. So at the end of the day, it is still not a benefit for the side opposition, because since you are not providing them, you are not forcing these choices upon them, they are unable to accept the healthcare system at the end of the day. So the issue of trust, protecting the trust, is not exclusive to them.
Why,
And
please?
secondly, on the issue of herd immunity, on the issue of herd immunity, they are talking about they're just making assumptions on where we have developed countries in which the most of the people or the majority of the people are believers in vaccinations. How about backward countries or developing countries, for example, Indonesia, or for example Malaysia itself, where we still have a lot of people living in the rural areas who doesn't actually understand how vaccination works, and due to that they have a fear to vaccinations. And on their world, they are unable to protect these particular minority group of people because they are unable to make the choice due to their ignorance. By following our model under our world, we are providing these options, or we are taking out this luxury of choice in order for them to further encourage how we should vaccinate the community as a whole. Now, talking about the harms, right? On our side, the only thing that we acknowledge is that we are actually trampling the rights of a few people. But as I've mentioned before, these rights are far less significant to the health of the society at large. On their side, they are unable to ensure an efficient way to actually achieve herd immunity at large. And that, with that, I would like to proudly propose today's motion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, speaker, for their remarks. The timing was 6 minutes and 58 seconds. All right. So now it's time to listen to the rebuttals of opposition whip.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Starting my speech in three. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now notice that both sides of the house, what we want public health care to be better for everyone of the country, and especially in the terms of pandemic, we are extremely worried about those who don't want vaccines, because this debate, this motion is concerning making vaccines mandatory, and it's usually because of anti-vaxxers. So this debate should focus on that. Now, what are the flaws of the government side so far? They have a complete disengagement. They only talk about efficacy and whether vaccines are good. But we on this side, we also acknowledge that vaccines are good for people. But this is not what the debate is about. The debate is about whether this policy is the best policy to vaccinate people and to make them realize how good vaccines are. And so they've also never engaged on our point about how on their side, in their world, people will be driven away from vaccines even more, especially anti-vaxxers who already have a strong opinion about them. And we've mentioned that several times throughout our side. Now, I'd like to start with a few rebuttals coming from the government side. What did the whip tell you? The whip told you, so at the start of his speech, the whip said that they're literally disregarding anti-vaxxers now because they are hopeless and they don't have any faith at all. But this is self-contradictory because their previous speaker mentioned that anti-vaxxers do have trust in the healthcare system for other diseases such as, a broken leg and broken head or whatnot. And the whip also talked about developing countries. But notice that in developing countries, most people are uneducated about vaccines. They are the ones who don't know about vaccines that much. And it will create even more division between these people who don't know about vaccines when they are forced to get vaccines, forced to get a chemical they know nothing about. No, thank you, reject. Forced to take a chemical they know nothing about by the government. And because in developing countries, usually those poor and those who are anti-vaxxers already feel power imbalances against them from the government, they definitely will not trust the government to force them to take these vaccines. And it will create more distrust, as my previous speaker already mentioned. And they've also talked about giving back to society. But we don't see why giving back to society is such an important thing when society is oppressing them themselves by disregarding their freedom of choice. And also, in abstract, we take the principle of consent because only our side preserves this principle of consent, which is technically a human right to freedom of choice in the first place. So this harm... only our side provides the principle and the freedom of consent, and therefore we don't believe that society is that much important. Now, government also brought to you certain points, for example, about herd immunity. We agree that herd immunity is indeed necessary, but herd immunity can be achieved on both ends. And my previous speakers have already told you how, because minorities are anti-vaxxers are minorities, and even the whip agreed to that. So because they are minorities, we don't need them to get vaccinated. We don't need to force them because other people who want to take the vaccine anyways will provide enough herd immunity for the countries. And even their whip has said that minority makes up the anti-vaxxers. Now, in the long term, it will drive people further away, and it will be counterproductive to achieving what we on both sides want, which is a better public healthcare system for these people, especially in the case of pandemic. And okay, they've also talked about children of anti-vax parents needing to get the vaccine, but we've already told you also how by forcing an anti-vax family's child to get a vaccine, after the child goes back, there'll be more tension within the family, and the family will antagonize the public healthcare system even more, forcing these things onto the child. And these children will be further more vulnerable to other health diseases because the parents won't want to send them to good hospitals, such as public hospitals where they force these vaccines onto their kids in the past instead. So with this distrust in their world, what do these children look like? The children will be less protected against diseases in the future, even common ones like flu. And considering how more pandemics are likely to pop up, they'll be more exposed to these diseases and be strongly against vaccination in the future, which is worse off for the public health care of these children, which government is so concerned about. But in our world, the child might not get vaccinated right now, but they don't antagonize the healthcare system. They'll engage in more discussions and maybe be more open to vaccinations in the future, which will protect them even further in the long run. And with that, I would like to go to the few main clashes. So first of all, which world would anti-vaxxers will gradually be more open to vaccines? We've already proven you that in their world, what will happen is these people who are anti-vaxxers will further antagonize and polarize these people. They'll stay in their echo chambers of people who are anti-vaxxers because they feel like they'll be judged, shunned, and ashamed by people who believe in the usage of vaccines. We do have to acknowledge that these people have their beliefs for a reason. For example, we know that vaccines have killed people before, have a negative side effects and whatnot. Therefore, we have to respect their decisions as well, because if we don't, they'll stay in their echo chambers where they feel more comfortable, and they'll refuse to engage in discourse and whatnot. And therefore, we lack the point of contact. And because of that, we've proven to you how in our world, anti-vaxxers will be more open to vaccines because they'll go to the hospitals, they'll engage in more discourse, they'll hear more people talking about it rather than shutting them off from it as a whole. Now, second clash, in which world would lead to more public trust and healthcare in the long term? And better public healthcare in the long term. We've already told you as well how on our side we will encourage these anti-vaxxers to trust the public healthcare even more, because if you are forced to get vaccines without a choice, then immediately you'll feel distrust against these parties who are technically forcing you to do something you don't want to do. So in our world, we'll have better trust. But what have they told you? They just told you that law, enforcing these laws, forcing them equals to education, which will change the minds of anti-vaxxers. But we've already proven you how this is not true. No, thank you, reject. And in which world would solve the current pandemic better? We've already told you that on either side, we can solve the current pandemic because there's herd immunity within everyone, because anti-vaxxers are a minority group. Now, moving on to what we as government have told you about why this policy is not the best policy, and instead is a policy that will undermine the process of what we've been going through of engaging people to trust the public healthcare even more, but it'll further reverse this process. We've told you that how it's principally unjust and a breach and infringement into our human rights, into the autonomy of people who don't want to take vaccines because of their own beliefs. For example, a reasonable beliefs like it's not good for them. And we've told you how that if you force them, they won't go to hospitals and whatnot because they feel like medical experts overrode medical decisions in the past anyway. So whether it's any injuries like common flus or breaking their heads or heart attacks, they won't go to hospitals. And lastly, we've told you how we would encourage on our side more point of contact with the topic of vaccination, and therefore change their minds more easily than their will. And therefore, we believe that we would take the case. Thank you.
Thank you. The timing was 7 minutes and 17 seconds. Now that we have heard all the three speakers from both teams, we shall take a short break of 1 minute. During this time, both the government and the opposition teams will prepare the reply speech. Right. So the time of 1 minute has ended. I shall now invite the second speaker from the opposition team to deliver the reply speech.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Unlike what the government wants to believe, the debate was never about whether vaccines are good or not. The debate was never about whether vaccines can actually cure diseases or can achieve immunity. The debate has always been about which side can better protect the autonomy and the continued trust of the certain segments of society that do not readily believe in the vaccine or do not readily seek out vaccines. We've told you why systematically the imposition of their policy does not cater to these people, and that's ultimately where they lose out. Recognize that the government bench has largely been debating in an ideal land and absolutely refused to engage with the harmful consequences of their policy. My entire speech was talking about what happens after their policy was implemented, and yet all three speakers just wanted to talk to you about how great vaccines are and how necessary they are in context of the pandemic and in context of public health in general. I've talked to you about in my reply speech why ultimately the debate boils down to the interests of those primary stakeholders and why we win this debate. Let's first go over some things that are symmetrical on both sides of the House. Number one, the efficacy of vaccines. No one on opposition is contesting the fact that vaccines are in fact effective in curing disease and preventing disease. We're only telling you about how, at a point in time in which you impose legislation that actively infringes upon the autonomy of a patient, that is the point in time in which you lose that patient's trust in the healthcare system and the point in time in which you lose the integrity of the healthcare system in preserving public health. Number two, people getting vaccinated. We've told you time and time again, we're still going to have an opt-in policy for our people who want to get vaccinations under our side of the house, which means that all of that benefits about how you can reduce medical costs and all of those things, which I've already told you are still not exclusive to their side, are still obtainable under our side of the house because we're not outright abandoning the concept of vaccines. We're only telling you that at a point in time in which we have to protect certain stakeholders who do not agree with the vaccine, that is more imperative because we have to make sure that these people are still catered for in light of how other people who are already okay with the vaccine are going to get it anyway. Third thing, a feasible vaccination model is going to exist under our side of the house as well. I've told you why the benefits of medical bills and the benefits of herd immunity are still largely achievable under our side. We don't think those things are exclusive to the government bench. So what does this debate boil down to? We've told you that this debate eventually boils down to the parts of society who wouldn't otherwise get vaccinated. The parts of society who are starkly opposed to the concept of vaccinations for whatever reason, and the fact that these people are going to be the most disenfranchised under the establishment of the government's policy. I'm going to answer three questions. Number one, why does the government bench lose out in this debate? They've argued to you on the premise that public health is solely dependent on the fact that people get vaccinations. I've challenged that premise and I've told them, no, public health doesn't depend on people getting vaccinated. Public health depends and is guaranteed by continued public trust in the healthcare system. The only way you can confirm that your health of a community is going to be guaranteed in the long term is that these people are going to seek out medical attention when they get sick, that these people are going to have trust in the medical system to be able to go and consult a doctor when they feel like they need to. At a point in time in which you legislate some sort of policy that actively pushes these people away, that is when you threaten public health, because that is when you create disconnect between the healthcare system that you want to champion for and the people you claim you want to protect. Secondly, what are the exclusive harms of the government's policy? Recognize that there was no engagement as to my arguments at all about how these people are going to be further disconnected from the healthcare system. I took them at their absolute best and I told them why, even after the implementation of their policy, after you force people to get vaccines, why it's ultimately harmful. There was no engagement into my analysis about how you further drive anti-vaxxers away, how you further fuel these echo chambers, and how you inevitably reduce the chances of them even changing their minds, because now you actively other them in society and make them feel like their medical opinions are illegitimate. What are the exclusive benefits on opposition's model? That's the third and final question. We've told you, number one, we preserve public trust in the healthcare system by virtue of preserving patient autonomy. This is imperative in engaging with the idea that public health is the pillar of public trust is the pillar of public health, insofar as long as we can guarantee that these people still seek out medical attention when they want to, even if it's for things not related to the vaccine, even if it means they don't get vaccinated, that's still a benefit we can claim, because that means that at the long run, these people are going to get medical attention when they need to, and we can preserve public health. Second benefit of opposition's model is the second benefit is that we're the most likely ones to make these people change their minds because of the point of contact they can have with doctors at a point in time in which they're more likely to seek out doctors. If you want a world that realistically paints a picture of what anti-vaxxers look like and actually takes into account the complexities of the anti-vax community in light of the public health system, side with opposition.
All right, thank you, Speaker, for that speech. The timing was 4 minutes and 17 seconds. So I should now call upon the Deputy Prime Minister from the government team to deliver their reply speech.
Okay, wait, give me a minute, yeah. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good evening again. I bid to the adjudicators and my fellow debaters. I'm the deputy leader again from the government side, and in this session, I would address all the clashes of point brought up in this debate, reaffirm my team's case, and ultimately prove why we, the government side, has a better standing in this debate session. So first of all, the government side had elaborated in detail about how we would make the vaccines mandatory by way of legislating the laws governing it, and also push the healthcare systems, push the healthcare communities to spread awareness and ask them and require them to provide campaigns for vaccination. This is totally addressed. This totally addresses the opposition's statement, where they fixated on the fact that they would rather spread awareness. We would also spread awareness. It's not like we are neglecting that fact. And the government side had taken into consideration the other aspects on why and how we would make vaccinations mandatory. So on the ethical question, who is more ethical, whether it's the government side or the opposition side? Would you rather let people fall into detriment than hold them back? And that is the ethical question. And that is why the government side has been proposing the mechanism of imposing laws and also pushing the healthcare system to making vaccines mandatory, to spread awareness about vaccines. So let's look at the clashes of point. First of all, the benefits. We are pushing for making vaccines mandatory in the light of the recent pandemic for the benefit of the public. Yes, we, the government side, have been more extensive in providing the case of the benefit it would bring also to the individuals and public, to make them safer, to make a difference between their life and death, and to prevent higher hospital expenses. In this way, you cannot say that the government is only doing it for our selfish reasons, while the benefit that the opposition had only brought up was the benefit that it would have to the anti-vax groups. And they have not considered that there are smaller or other parts of society that might be affected without the mechanism that the government side has provided, because they might not be able to gain the extensive reasons educating them why they must be vaccinated. And that is the mechanism that the government is trying to push. So who achieves herd immunities much efficiently? So the opposition side have stated that they have gained herd immunity more efficiently, but the government side had clearly addressed the matter more efficiently, because we are fighting to save the whole population, and that proves for a more wider herd immunity, and not just spare the feelings of a few small groups of society. We are trying not to neglect them, but also to educate them on why vaccination must be mandatory. So which side would more be able to educate and spread awareness? The government side had elaborated on how the mechanism would work by imposing laws and pushing the healthcare community to spread awareness. However, the opposition side is fixating on the current method that is not seen as effective as to this day. So the government side has also provided how the mechanism would protect public trust in the healthcare system by pushing them towards educating themselves, towards awareness, while the opposition only provides the mechanism to let the anti-vax group be set in their ways and the mindset that they have already conquered. So, ladies and gentlemen, in reviewing the points that have been reaffirmed and the clashes of points that I've brought up in this debate, the government side has been more comprehensive in this debate and had addressed all the important issues. And that is why we urge the floor to support the motion today. And with that, I thank you.
All right, thank you. The timing was 4 minutes sharp. Okay, so thank you. We have now come to the end of the debate. This round is a silent round. The result will be announced in the roll call room. With that, the House of Parliament is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you,
Madam Chairperson. Thank you, debaters. Thank you, adjudicators.
Thank you, everyone.
everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you all. See you.